E mihi ana ki ngā uri i te whātea tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ore te whānau ko haere mai ki te whakarongo, ki te kōrero, ki te tautohitohi, ki ngā kai tōranga uri konei. Haere mai tēnā koutou ki ngā mana whenua i konei, Ngāti whātua o rākei tēnā koutou. Kia tātou, kia pai te pō. Tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ore everyone. My name is Jack, and I was the third choice. So, it's good. Yeah, I feel good about that. First of all, they said, Paddy, go, can you do it? And Paddy says yes to everything. I'm not sure if you've been following him on Instagram over the last couple of days. He's in America. I know. I'm like, yo. He's been detained by Bernie Sanders' security staff. So he returns to me. I was like, Paddy, you're not just embarrassing yourself, you're embarrassing us. So Paddy had to pull out, and then they were like, we'll get the next thing, we'll get the thinking person's Paddy, we'll get Toby Manhart and spin-off. And Toby was like, yeah, Honey P, I'm into this, I'd be delighted to be there, you know, he kind of brings that intellectual bent, or likes to think he does, and then he pulled out as well. And then they were like, damn. This thing starts in 2 hours. Who are we going to call? And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing anything, it's fine. So, kia ora everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Jack. I am a journalist for TVNZ. I work for Q&A, and I know that you all delight in getting up at 8:45 on a Sunday morning so that you can watch an hour of political interviewing. And then, of course, you download the podcast afterwards, which I really appreciate. It's available where you get all good podcasts. This is pretty simple tonight. This is going to be pretty freewheeling and pretty loose. You will have noticed a selection of candidates before you. Some are current sitting MPs, some are electorate MPs, one or two. One is a minister, but we're not calling you a minister tonight, are we, minister? No? No, absolutely not. I need you to do something for me though before we begin. Okay? On the count of 3, I need you to say, oh. John Tamahedi cannot be here. 1, 2, 3. He was supposed to be here. JT pulled out later than Toby Manhart, which is saying something. So, you just have to pretend that JT is here saying slightly curmudgeonly and potentially controversial things. He wouldn't mind saying it. No. Please don't talk to me. The way I figured this would work is, I don't want to have a timer. We're beyond that. I reckon if someone speaks for too long, you guys will let them know. And I know that some of you are here representing your parties of choice, your members of parties. That's fantastic. We love to see people involved in politics. But let's keep in mind that one of the most attractive attributes in a person is an open mind. Okay? So, I don't know, wait a few seconds before you shout someone down, maybe. At the end of the debate, I will leave some space for questions. Maybe the only rule that I will stipulate there is that you can't ask patsy questions of a candidate from your own party. Okay? So, I know, I'm almost as disappointing as JT not being here. So think about those for now. But what we'll do is we'll cover a few points of contention in a few different policy areas, but we will give each of the candidates here an opportunity to stand up and introduce themselves and explain, I think, what differentiates their party. Instead of just why you should vote for their party come September, I think what differentiates their party is perhaps more interesting. And what I will do is once they've given you the little spiel about why their party is the greatest, yada, 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 I will ask them a potentially curly question. So each candidate gets a potentially curly question. I'll brainstorm those now, so that it's not just a free pass the whole way, and then we will move into some specific policy areas. So thank you very much for being here this evening. It's really encouraging in an election year to see young people in particular engaged and involved with politics. I hope you have a good evening. And would you please put your hands together as he tells us what differentiates his party from the rest. Labour's Michael Wood.
Kia koutou katoa. Michael Wood, MP from Mount Gospel. My job is that I'm the Chief Government Whip. My party, Labour Party, has been around in New Zealand for 100 years, and a lot changes over that time, but there are some things that are really core to who we are. The first is that we've got a fundamental belief that every single person is imbued with an inherent sense of dignity, should be treated with respect, and should have the opportunity to be able to succeed and reach their fullest potential in life. Secondly, we believe that while we're all individuals, we don't just walk around in a little bubble. We live in societies, we live in communities, and people do best when we actually have strong and supportive communities around people, help to lift people up and carry them along. And the third and final thing is that we're a progressive party. That means that we're always saying, how can we make things better? We're not happy with the status quo. We're not just happy to live in a market that just kind of treats us like little cogs in the machine. We think, how do we improve things and leave things better for the next generation? Those are the three things that drive me, that drive Jacinda, that drive our party, and that I think make us different. Cheers.
So what I'll do is I'll get each of the candidates just to do as Michael did there and introduce themselves, and then I will ask them a potentially curly question. You're in government, okay, so you get a pretty big one. But I think back to the last election. Perhaps the three areas of greatest concern to New Zealand voters were housing, mental health and poverty. Our suicide rate hasn't moved. Statistics New Zealand says that material hardship rates for child poverty have not changed in any significant way. And housing, you promised to build 16,000 homes in Kiwi Build. You've got a few hundred done. Why should we believe you when, in the eyes of many, Labour has not delivered on its promise?
See, Jack sort of positioned himself as I think he's woman's crumpet, and he's the mean guy when it comes to questioning us. But it's a fair question, and it's just kind of the hard business of being in government. And I think we all know that New Zealand's a great place to live, but we've got some pretty serious issues and problems that have built up over many years in our country. All of those ones he listed off: child poverty, housing, mental health. No one thinks that they happen like that. They built up over decades and decades of our country, were badly neglected. And we've made a start, we're making progress in each of those. So just to pull you up on one little thing, Jack, if I may, in terms of child poverty, we're now making positive movement in 7 of the 9 key areas in the way in which we measure child poverty. And one of the differences between this government and the last government is the last government actually stopped measuring a lot of those things. We've made ourselves accountable. And what we've actually done in our budget, we've said in our budget each year, it's not good enough for governments to measure their fiscal surplus or deficit in a budget every year. Because we can have a surplus, but if we've got kids living in cars, that's not the country we want. So we've said that as a government, every year in our budget, we measure ourselves on the progress we're making on child poverty and other measures of well-being for people in our communities. So that's the commitment that we make. And in every one of those areas, we're not there yet, it will take time, but we're making progress. 4,000 new state houses, and that's making a difference in my communities and around New Zealand.
Supplementary question. Has New Zealand transformed under a Labour-led government?
Yeah, absolutely. Who stands up on the world stage and speaks our values of kindness, and we're going to make it about people's well-being. We're going to make it about cleaning up the rivers. We're going to make it about kids coming out of poverty. When you have a government that actually builds new state houses instead of selling them off like the last government to the housing crisis, that's transformation.
For our next candidate speaking this evening, would you please put your hands together as he explains what differentiates his party, which I must point out is currently polling as the most popular party in New Zealand. Please welcome Paul Goldsmith.
Hawkins said it, the last time they had a debate, at the end of it they had a vote as to who was going to vote for National. There's about 120 people and one did. So I thought that was a little bit underrepresented of the population. I'm glad to see there's a great interest in politics here today, as shown by so many coming along. So all the very best. I studied here for 6 years, doing a BA and an MA in history, and I love this place and love the time I had here. So I wish. As a matter of fact, it's very useful. What did you study?
Broadcast journalism.
National Party is an aspirational, upbeat party. We've been in New Zealand. A great place to live, a great place to grow up and to have opportunities. And we want this country to do well, and we believe that we were actually making great progress and continue to make great progress in the country. And this is a place where we want more of you to see that you've got the opportunity to live the life that you want here in this country. Now, we've had 2 years of this Ardern Peters government, and what you see there is great talk, big hope, big aspirations, lots of announcements. I mean, if I was forced to come up with a bumper sticker for the government, it would say, Labour is the thought that counts. The only problem is it's not the thought that counts, it's actually what you do that counts. And as we've seen, where are the houses? They've actually, the Prime Minister, through her intervention, has stopped more houses being built at Igumato than have been built by the entire and so, if you look across the transport front, they've come in, their prime decision was to stop all the projects that we were working on in terms of transport, trying to get the city moving, get people around from A to B, and 2 years later they've woken up to the fact that actually it might have been quite a good idea in the first place, and we've wasted 2.5 years on infrastructure for the city, which is holding us back. And then you can go through all the other things. And so we could be doing better. We're now facing a very difficult situation here with the coronavirus. The only point I'd make on that is we will all work together constructively to try and do our best to get New Zealand through what we hope will be a short, sharp period of difficulty, and so we can get back. But we just don't know what the outcome of that will be. The only point is that we just do need to remember that we entered this period at a time of slowing growth and slowing momentum. And growth was only about 1.6% last year. You might say, well, who cares? Why is that important? Well, it's what sustains all the prosperity that we enjoy.
Paul Goldsmith is, of course, National's economic spokesperson. I'll tell you what, it will be adapted if someone here has coronavirus. Why not? After this. I'm just saying, it will be. Okay, my curly question to you is, we appreciate that under the MMP system, New Zealand elections differ from, say, a presidential campaign, but why is your leader so unpopular?
As a student of journalism, you will no doubt be familiar with our political history, and you'll see that Simon Bridges' preferred Prime Minister ranking around 10, 11% or whatever is absolutely what you expect and normal. If you look at Helen Clark, if you look at Sidney Bolton,
Not what he's about England, is it? Andrew Little,
Andrew Little was much further down, Simon, I think, is doing a good job, and it's not easy. If he wasn't doing a good job, National wouldn't be the most popular party in all the polls of the vote. I understand that it's a zero turn, and Winston Peters and whoever the Green people are, they came in. Let's be honest, they are a doormat for this government, they just do whatever happens. Let's be honest. But anyway, they inherited these big surfaces, enormous amounts of money, huge momentum, and they're still less popular than us. So where does that get you?
A lot of surplus chat coming up this evening. Paul Goldsmith. party from all the others. It certainly is. Please welcome the only woman on the stage tonight, New Zealand First, Tracy Martin.
Ko mātu te whānau, ko mohi te whānau whāngai, ko ngāti ka nunu te iwi, ko Tracy taku ingoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm still trying to figure out whether you want to be serious tonight or not. So, I beg your pardon? And again, so the question still stands. And I just want to remind Jake that I know your mum. So supplementary questions is going to be appropriate. Okay, so New Zealand, what is it that's different about New Zealand First? New Zealand First, there's a young man that isn't informed. So New Zealand First was created because of the 1980s and the 1990s and what happened in this country. The inequity that you are seeing between our populations now is a result of that. It was started by Labour and it was taken to another level by National. So New Zealand First, that's the reason we exist. It's the reason the current coalition government exists. It's not a Labour-led government, it is a coalition government. We have to get our heads around MMP. We have to get our heads around MMP. This is the best coalition government you've had because it's the first coalition government you've had. I led the negotiations during those 12 days. Is that because you don't think a woman can do it? What is the one thing you want for our vote, and now go away. This is a government that constantly talks to each other and has to agree on where we are going to go. New Zealand First has been pivotal in creating the coalition government because this country needed to change direction. There are too many people who don't have what should be the standard of living that we should all expect. And that is what makes New Zealand First different from the rest. Kia ora.
Don't take it out on Mum. At times, people have associated New Zealand First leader Winston Peters with xenophobic views. I'm sure many of the people in this auditorium will have seen the recent comments from your colleague Shane Jones with regards to Indian students in New Zealand. Why should people support a party that many people believe fosters racist views?
So I suppose people need to go and actually have a look at what the policies and the values are of New Zealand First. I would also ask you not to just believe what you read in the paper. Because I'm sure that through the New Zealand education system, what you've been asked to do is to confirm. I hope that is what you do. Jack, you said at the start here that the most attractive thing on a human being was an open mind. If you want to know, if you want those questions answered, if you want more detail about that was reported as this, then ask, find out, double check. So ask me the question. Why did you say what? So Shane Jones was wrong. Shane Jones was wrong because the historical information he should have been referring to a historical situation was actually in 2016. 2016 and the investigation into the Mumbai office with regard to the PTEs in this country. So please don't rewrite history with regard to what was across all of the newspapers back in 2016. But I agree, it is inappropriate and unhelpful to pick on a group of people rather than picking on an issue.
Tracy Martin, ladies and gentlemen, Tracy Martin. Next up, here to explain what differentiates his party, Axton Seymour.
Thanks a lot, folks. and I always start my talks at the University of Auckland with a quote from Ben Harper, and it goes like this: my choice is what I choose to do, and if it's causing no harm, it shouldn't bother you. Your choice is who you choose to be, and if you're causing no harm, then you're right with me. And I start with that because it's a philosophy that if we all took it a bit more seriously, we would have a kinder, more peaceful, more humane and prosperous world. But far too often, we find ourselves asking politicians to make us rich. But we forget that they can only do that by taking your money. They only have one source, and that is to take with one hand and give with the other. We often ask politicians to make rules for other people, hoping that it will somehow impose our views on them, forgetting that they are creating new rules that we too will have to follow. And I advocate for freedom, because if we want to end hate, then we must be able to speak freely and openly disagree. There's no other way to do it. If we wish to end poverty, then we need to become prosperous. And that means people creating new companies with interesting jobs, making innovative goods and services that people want to consume at a price they can afford. That's the only way to end poverty. And if we want to end homelessness, no amount of additional rulemaking is going to make people housed. Only getting out and building more homes is going to do it. And you can go through almost any issue facing people in this room and beyond, and the answer is not politicians and their grand government schemes giving with one hand and taking with the other, but actually freeing people and unleashing the creativity of a free society to solve our problems for ourselves and those that we care about. That's why it stands for freedom. But we also have another differentiator, which is that we do something about it. I'm the only elected member of Parliament, in fact the only one in living memory, who's been offered the ministerial limousine and the 50 grand pay rise and turned it down. And I did that because I wanted to advance the end of life choice bill so that we could have legalised assisted dying in New Zealand, and I did it because I believe in freedom and compassion. I would say thank you, especially the people who clapped and aren't in the designated fan zone. Thank you. But I appreciate you guys too. And the ACT Party, with one MP, created charter schools that changed the lives of kids who were disadvantaged and disengaged for the better, by giving free societies the ability to take responsibility for their community and use their funding their way. Those are the kinds of things that a party does that actually wants to make New Zealand a better place, but it starts with a firm belief in individual freedom, and that's why I hope that many of the people here on election day will be giving their party vote to ACT.
Question for David.
What do you got, Jack?
You are in Parliament because of a deal with the National A deal in one of, if not the wealthiest suburb in New Zealand, or electorate in New Zealand. Why can't you stand on your own 2 feet?
Jack Tame doesn't understand how Ipsum works. He doesn't understand how ACT works. He doesn't understand that there is a deal, but it's a deal with the voter. And the proposition is that if you want a good local MP and you want to bring a whole extra party into Parliament, we'll give you 2 for 1. And I live for the day when instead of belittling and deriding that entrepreneurial and creative strategy, then we actually say, that's pretty cool. And some of these other guys, if they have the wit to get out and knock on the door and do the work could do it too. And if they did, they might be in Parliament. But they won't be. And so I say to people, there is no deal, there is a strategy. And I actually think that we should admire people who get out and use the rules and work hard within the rules to achieve. And I hope that one day, Jack Tame, you will see the benefit of meritocracy. And rather than belittling people that succeed, you'll learn to admire them. Thank you very much.
Just a gentle reminder to all candidates, it's not personal. Be interesting to see if you call it entrepreneurial if Labour stands down in Auckland. Anyway, next up, please put your hands together as he explains what differentiates his party, Ricardo Merendez March for
Thank you so much for the applause. My name is Ricardo Menendez March, and I'm standing in my particular election. I want to begin by paying tribute to our late co-leader, Janet Fitzsimons, and take a leaf out of one of her speeches in Parliament that spoke true to the issues that the Green Party stands for, and that is that we cannot nurture our environment without also nurturing people, or the other way around. And to me, Janet Fitzsimons' work of standing up to power, to the political establishment, and being at the front lines, is at the core of what the Green Party has been since its inception. And I look around 10 years later after she made that speech, I look around at who is next to me? People who are in the pockets of property investors, got lobbyists, from the Labour and National Party who has promised change, but perpetuate a system that has not been working for us. We're at a time where rents keep getting higher, incomes remain relatively stagnant, property investors keep making a killing out of the housing crisis while our waiting list for state homes keep getting larger. We still have polluting industries and oil companies destroying our environment, and I witness the events of the climate crisis every week in our planet. So I'm in the Greens because we've been the only party consistently advocating to increase benefit levels for universal public housing for all, healthcare, public transport, increasing student allowances so that we can lift people out of poverty and be leaders on climate issues. This election we have a choice. And yes, while we have made some progress, and we don't want to go back to the times of John Key and the National Party-led government, we have to go further and faster, and that means actually increasing our share of party vote this election. I am asking people to vote for the Green Party so that we can actually increase benefits, put the free public transport on the agenda, and strengthen the Zero Carbon Act so that it includes methane, and take on the banks and protect agricultural businesses so that New Zealand does not just talk about climate change that delivers on that. This is why I'm standing here today.
Can you hear that? Am I just projecting? Whoever said that shit, cut it out. You got that? Okay. Yeah, this might be a better one. Okay, my question for you, Ricardo. If we look at what the Greens have achieved in the last couple of years, plastic bags have been banned, but Greenpeace rates the Zero Carbon Act 0 out of 10. You can't even pass a fee bank for electric vehicles. So what's the point of having the Greens in a coalition government when you can't pass
Well, this is the reality, again, of an MMP government, and the fact that Labour and New Zealand First are not standing up for climate change, and they've been a consistent barrier for us to pass strong climate legislation. But you're right, the Green Party needs to go further on climate change, and we need to strengthen the Zero Carbon Act. We need to more things like synthetic nitrogen so that we deliver fresh water for all of us. I've just been looking at what's happening in Christchurch and the fact that in Christchurch, clean water is at risk because we have no limit on how much synthetic nitrogen we put in our water and in our system. So I'm absolutely keen for us to grow a party vote so that when we head to the negotiating table, New Zealand First and Labour cannot weaken climate legislation.
See, I love a democracy. Okay, there we go. Here to explain what differentiates its party, please put your hands together for Tops Jeff Simmons.
Kia ora, e ngā mana ko hui mai nei ki tēnei whare ki te kōrero i ngā whakaro, ka nui te aroha. Our current crop of politicians do not lead, they follow. They're sheep. Now don't get me wrong, I like sheep, particularly with minstrels, but I wouldn't vote for them. They're insufficiently... Sheep are insufficiently innovative and lacking in courage. And this is how we've ended up in the situation that we're in today. Because for the last 30 years, house prices and rents have been growing faster than incomes. Under a national government, under a Labour government, it's all been the same. Because the incentive for these guys is to talk a good game and sound like they're disagreeing with each other, and then in power do exactly the same thing that the last lot did. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Merry Christmas, Gen Z. The highest house prices and cost of housing in the world. Top is the only party with an actual plan to do something about that and bring down the cost of housing. It's what we must do for you guys to have any chance in the future. Oh, and by the way, at the same time, you've got to sort out the environmental crisis. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, dudes. And Mr. Seymour, freedom is only what you have left after you've paid your bills and your rent. Thank you very much.
My question for you is, what's your path to Parliament without Garrett's cash?
I was going to hit you up afterwards, Jack. You guys get paid pretty well, don't you? I mean, you're a male presenter at TVNZ, so you get paid pretty well. Sorry, should I not see that? I'm sorry. I like Jack. I'm sure he's got equal pay.
I'm not standing!
No, okay. What is our path? I mean, we've just launched our campaign, obviously. You know, without Gareth, we have had to conserve our funds. And so we're just going now, and it's up to the public to see what the response is. So we will see over the coming months. Follow us on Facebook, Top NZ. We have this great segue question here, Jack. If you want to join Top on campus, we've got Ari here. Come and see him afterwards. We'll be at Shadows tomorrow. Thanks, Joshua. Follow Joshua, actually. He's very funny. If you want to join us, we'll be at Shadows tomorrow at 3 p.m. And we're going to show. Hang on, we're going to show what a campaign can do without funding from the CCP and without funding from the fishing industry and without funding from people who wanted to kill a capital gains tax under a Labour-led government.
Everyone say, oh, 3, John, come here, can't be here. 1, 2, 3.
Aww.
That means, last but not least, from the new
tātou, my name is Eli Kikile, yes, New Conservative Deputy Leader. Now, first and foremost, this year is election year. This year will be the most important election in living memory. Going all the way back even to Palmer and Kirk and Muldoon. This year will be it. One of the biggest reasons, of course, is that we see across the globe the attacks on free speech, the attacks on our children via gender ideology, the attacks on every single aspect of our culture. And the golem, that is the Labour Party, New Zealand flip-flop and the Greens, continue to push these vicious angles upon us. We are proud. I come from nearly 20 years in the youth field working with suicidal ideation, sexual abuse and across the board. Over half of our leadership board have worked with the uppermost tier of youth who need assistance, and same with the whānau. We have seen on the front line the removal of the pillars that have made our nation great for so long. And we have seen that these attacks are not just stopping, not stopping, they're actually progressing even further. We find that the policies and the bills that have been brought in place right now are going to have the most dramatic effects upon our populace ever. And it's hurting us more and more. And I see it on the streets. And in here, it's all great fun. You will go and you'll have your studies, and we need you people to be well educated. But at the same time, we've got policies that are breaking down our youth, that are making people more corrupted and less resilient to the pressures of life. And so we're more than happy to stand up and say that we are patriots, we are nationalists, we love family. Family is us. We protect life. We protect it always.
Okay, Elliot. I mean, your party opposes abortion law reform.
Yes.
You believe that marriage between a biological man and a biological woman.
Yes.
For many of the people here, your social policies may be offensive. How do you intend to win them over?
One of the wonderful things about conservatism, as a conservative, whenever we make a decision based on the ideal principles, we remove our personal desire and opinion from it. Then we look at all the variable data that we have both here and abroad, and then we look on balance, and if on balance whether it will hurt or whether it will help our people, and then we put it forward. There are two genders, therefore we will protect women's sports, we will protect it from the utter removal, and we will protect life from the womb to the tomb.
That's another one. Okay, hey, I'm really aware that so we want to go to 8 o'clock tonight, and we do want you to have a very quick opportunity to speak to these candidates before we leave this evening. So guys, we've all had a nice little rant. We're going to keep it nice and tight from now on. And I won't ask you all to answer every question, but I'll try and be as fair-handed as possible here. We need to talk about the economy. If you guys have seen the headlines in the last couple of hours, it looks, I think, increasingly likely that New Zealand is heading towards a recession, at least in the first 2 quarters of this year, as we respond to COVID-19, the coronavirus. I want to start with Michael Wood and his government's response this evening as you stare down a potential global pandemic in 30 seconds or less.
One of the things about being in government is you don't know what's going to happen next, and this is a really good example of it. You have something like COVID-19 hit, and you need to know that you've got a government that's actually put plans in place that's actually ready to deal with something like this. And so because we've managed our economy in a way that allows us to put investment into education, health, housing, all those areas that were neglected, but we've managed the books well, we're now able to make sure that we keep things going. So if you haven't heard today, the Prime Minister's announced that we're going to be looking at a wage subsidy. So for small businesses and people in work who are potentially facing the loss of wages and their jobs because of COVID-19, we're now able to put support in place to make sure that we keep people in a decent standard of living, keep their jobs going. That's what being a responsible government's about, not just splashing the cash as soon as you've got it, but actually looking ahead and making plans and provisions for these kinds of events. That's the kind of leadership that we've got from Labour and got from this government, and it's one of the reasons that we're asking you to vote again this year.
Okay, I'll go straight to the opposition there. National's Paul Goldsmith, who is, of course, an economic spokesperson for National. How would you be responding to this crisis?
Well, look, there's two issues, the short term and longer term. So short term, we've got what is a dramatic and very difficult to work out how big an impact the coronavirus will have. And so we've been talking all week about the need for the government to not just announce that you can go directly on to benefits, but also do things to help keep people in work. We did that during the Canterbury earthquakes for businesses directly affected in what we hope will be a short-term disruption to have some sort of wage boost to get them through. Unfortunately, after a week, we had the big announcement today that are still thinking about it and they may do something extra. And that's good enough, actually, they need to get on with it. But longer term, the thing that you hear Grant Robertson saying time and time again is that the economy had great momentum going into this crisis. But of course it didn't have great momentum at all. The economy was slowing to the point that it was almost at stall speed last year. Our growth is about 1.6 and our population growth is about 1.6, so we actually weren't growing at all last year. And that's because of a wide range of government policies which are fundamentally about undermining business confidence. You only get growth, you only get your jobs, your opportunities, your ability to get a productive and exciting job if somebody somewhere makes an investment. And they only make an investment if they feel confident. And you know, the money that they put in is going to lead to something. And when they don't know what's going on and the government's making all sorts of unpredictable decisions here, there and everywhere, they're less likely to make that investment. And that's what we've seen in the last 2 years. They've also increased fuel taxes, done all sorts of things that have made people feel less like they've got less money in their pocket. So our view is that
unemployment in 10 years, right?
yeah, and you inherited that, but the job. This government inherited very low unemployment and massive surpluses. After 2 years, they've burned through the surpluses, and the job creation machine that we had has dried up. And so what we need to be having is a clear set of economic policies focused on growth, which is, and we announced today our regulatory bonfire, but also a decent small business relief package, some tax cuts, and some decent infrastructure. And we'll be outlining that over the next year.
Okay, I've got a question for Tracy here. Tracy, some economists would have looked at New Zealand over the last 10 or 15 years and asserted that immigration and high migration rates have artificially stimulated our economy. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID-19, and presumably there could be some impact upon migration.
Yeah.
But if New Zealand's economic response relies upon artificially boosting those migration numbers and allowing anyone to come, well, not anyone, but allowing high numbers of migration into New Zealand, are you satisfied with that, given your party leader wants to reduce migration to a net 10,000 a year in New Zealand?
So, with regard to migration, you know how I said that New Zealand First was founded on 15 fundamental principles, so I just want to read you number 8. Racist. Overseas skills and expertise, immigration will cease to be used as an excuse for our failure to train, skill and employ our own people. So that's been our value and that's been our immigration policy for 27 years. That's the policy. We will always need immigration. Our people go around the world. We need people to come here and help build this country. Yes, it's going to be a problem with COVID-19. I arrived back from the United States on Sunday at 9:10 after being there talking with the Five Eyes about child sexual exploitation in the digital environment. America is now facing this down in a way that we are not facing this down. So one, you can't build your country's economic, your whole economy based on immigration. We can see the side effect of that in the fact that the people who came into this country during the decade under the national government did not get the standard of living that they should have got. We absolutely 100% believe that if we bring in New Zealanders, they deserve the same standard of living as what a New Zealander who has been here for a long time deserves and believes is their right. So that's why we believe that you have to manage immigration. You have to build the infrastructure beforehand, you have to make sure the skills are there. So one of the reasons for the Provincial Growth Fund, however, Jack, is to make sure that it's not just immigration that is the basis of your economic development, and that your regions are continuing to be alive and vibrant and able to provide jobs and places to live and community for those New Zealanders who are in them, because we have to get more of our New Zealanders out of the region.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to go to Jeff Simmons here. I know he's a data guy. You're very excited about the developments the last few days, not in a good way, but what do you think this should be done?
Sure, Jack. Yeah, I actually studied economics here at Auckland. What we need to do, I mean, I take very much a long-term view, as Paul said, and if you think National or Labour have done any better on the economy than each other, then you're mad. Because really, for the past 30 years, our economic growth has been built on sticking more cows on the land, now on the side of the Southern Alps, importing more people and working harder. When it comes to actually productivity, which is the money that we get for each hour worked, New Zealand has been passed by the likes of Slovenia over the past couple of decades. Okay? So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Slovenia. But neither Labour nor National have dealt with the fundamental issue, which is we stick all of our money into housing. I think that's a good thing. We have the highest levels of investment in housing in the world. We have the highest house prices and rents in the world. And we wonder why our businesses struggle to get any money to invest. It's pretty bloody obvious. It's because we have the biggest tax break in the world for housing. You remove that, you get people investing in the productive economy that actually creates jobs and actually creates exports, and we'll all be better off.
Okay. I agree. Juliana's loving the spring. Let's go with that thing though. Let's stick with housing for the time being. It was a massive issue at the last election. I think Kiwi Bank reckons our housing shortage is going to hit 150,000 this year. David Seymour, am I right in thinking you are one of the only MPs not buying a house at the moment?
Well, you just whispered and I told you I don't, so yeah.
Okay, well, just what is your solution to New Zealand's affordable housing issue?
Oh, look, I think we've got to diagnose the problem. And I don't want to bore everyone to death, but you actually have to go through some numbers. And if you take the last 25 years, CPI inflation has gone up about 60%. So that's the price of everything you buy. Building costs per square metre have gone up about 240%. So that's higher than normal. The price of an Auckland section, the average Auckland section, has gone up 900% in 25 years. And that's why I disagree with the top analysis. You know, Jeff says that the problem is you're putting all the money in housing, but the real problem is that it's the land that you're short of more than anything else. And why are we short of land? Well, it's partly about the rules of zoning and where you can build. And it's partly about the infrastructure to actually get to that land. So we've got an infrastructure funding problem. They've actually got to attack it that way to find the problem and solve it. How might you do that? Well, the Ag Party says, look, you know, if you want councils to start building infrastructure and saying yes to consents and freeing up land and letting people buy more homes, then one of the things you could do is say, look, the councils have all the responsibilities, the central government gets all the revenue from the GST, the income tax and so on. So if a new house is sold in a council's territory, we give the GST to the council. Two reasons. One is that it actually gives them money to build infrastructure. So maybe one day we'll have trains like Sydney, maybe one day we'll have roads that work. And two is that if councils know they're going to get money in return for consenting, actually letting you build more stuff, then they might be a bit more willing to say yes for a change. So that is the diagnosis. I have been on this topic. I did this professionally when I worked in Canada. I've been on this topic for almost 15 years. And it is fundamentally about infrastructure, land use, zoning and supply. The numbers are there, the analysis is there. What has been lacking is the courage to take it on politically. There's a very unpopular government that says house prices may drop. The second thing I'd say is that I don't think it's helpful for this to be a boomer versus Gen Z thing. I don't think it's helpful to say those bastards screwed up, we're going to tax them. What I think is helpful is to say this generation deserves the right to build like previous generations did. And that's going to mean fixing the infrastructure funding and land use planning regimes that we have that have staff supply and seen those sections go up 900%. So I'm very committed to doing this. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I do want to fix this problem for the next generation. But I'll finish with one final number. This is why you should care, even if it doesn't affect you personally. 25 years ago, we had the bottom 20% of households spending a quarter of their income on housing costs. Today, it's over half their income. I was up at Kids Can in Albany last week. We have the Salvation Army come and see us in Parliament. They all say the same thing. The issue is not that poor people don't have money. The issue is that all their money is gone after they've paid for their housing. So people can titter and laugh, but you listen, you might learn something. And funnily enough, I'm saying exactly what you said. It's the after housing income that matters. So you've got to care about this issue, not only for your own sake, not only for poor MPs like me that can't afford it, but actually if we're going to be an equitable society with social mobility, we've got to fix that housing story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael, I'll go to you now. David used the word courage. Why should someone selling $20 million worth of residential property not pay capital gains?
It's very, very simple again. They pay tax on the income they use to buy. They pay tax on any rental income they get from renting it out. And then you want to tax them on the capital as well. Now, double taxation is bad enough, triple taxation is worse. And the real answer is that we have a capital gains tax in every country in the world except for Switzerland and New Zealand. And people say, oh, that's terrible. I say, let's be like Switzerland, because Vancouver has a housing crisis, Sydney has a housing crisis, LA has a housing crisis, oh my God. And I wish sometimes, Jack, instead of going to broadcasting school, you'd done economics.
To be clear, I'm not standing, number one. And number two, the tax working group did make it clear that a capital gains tax would not significantly impact New Zealand's housing crisis. So, okay, I went to broadcasting school, but I can run my eyes over it. It's a question that eyes of many. Hang on, Jack. No, we'll get the mic here. It is a question that in the eyes of many of fairness. So, why shouldn't people pay a comprehensive capital gains?
So housing is fundamentally about fairness. It's one of the most basic things that any person needs. If we have people in our society who miss out on decent housing, that's a core fairness issue. The tax working group did recommend a CGT of a certain type. They did say it would make some difference at the edge. I personally support the idea of a CGT. We have one that we've extended, which is a bright line test. So we've set it 3 years under the previous government. We've boosted it up to 5 years. We've also changed the tax rules to stop people, property speculators, getting a leg up.
Well, they also rules it out for any time to use
houses. But the main thing that we can actually do to get the cost of housing down and to give people a fair shot is a supply issue. David gave a whole number before. Here's the key number in Auckland. When we came into office, Auckland was basically 40,000 houses short for our population growth over the last 30 years. That's why houses cost so much, the supply and demand mix. What we have done is, for the first time in about 40 years, we're now actually building enough houses each year for Auckland's population growth, and we're building more state and affordable houses for the families who really need them. It's getting that supply up that is going to be the biggest thing we can do, and we're making big progress on that.
Everyone always says, oh, we just reform the RMA, we're easy My question for Paul Goldsmith is, do you accept that your party is partially responsible for the housing situation?
I think all New Zealanders are responsible for it. Jack Tame was analysis of the drivers of it pretty accurate in terms of the cost of land and dealing with those issues. And we've had difficulties around that for a long time. The capital gains tax was never going to solve the problem. What the government is on board for is for 2 years, we were wondering about whether we were going to have a capital gains tax. Remember, I talked about the fact that you only get jobs and growth and opportunities when people invest. Well, of course, nobody would invest for 2 years if they weren't sure whether or not they were going to pay a capital gains tax on it or not. And those sorts of things, all that unpredictability is one of the reasons why the economy has been growing so slowly since they came to office. So the other point I would make about rental properties is that, and this is related to the regulatory stuff we're talking about today, it's not compulsory for somebody to rent out a house. And that's a basic sort of understanding that the government doesn't seem to get. So if you make it more difficult, annoying, troublesome, expensive, unprofitable, risky, and all these things to rent out a house, then the natural reaction for people is to say, well, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to get out of the market. And it'll sort itself out over 10 years, but in the short term, what you see is that there's not enough houses available for rent. And what happens is the price goes up. And we've seen renting properties go up, the prices go up on average $50 a week. And so that is one of the great drivers of real pressure on households and families across this economy. It's why this government hasn't made the progress that it hoped to make on poverty. Because one hand of their policies has been going in that direction, but the other one, by adding costs to landlords and houses, has gone in the other direction.
Okay. Let's go to Ricardo.
Where do I even start with this? Look, I think the politicians who have spoken about supply in the housing sector are, in my view, completely out of touch with the reality of where we're at. We've got tens of thousands of empty homes in New Zealand. We've got landlords who are literally holding us hostage. When the capital gains tax and regulations were in the past, landlords were threatening to put rents up. This is a political system that these politicians have allowed to exist. This is not just a supply issue. This is about politicians seeing housing as an investment as opposed to a human right. We would just say that this government has built some state housing. It's a really low bar considering the National Party was selling them off. We need not just to build some more state homes, we need to build enough. And the reality is that at the rate we're building state housing, we're not even going to match the waiting list in 4 years. What we're saying is that generations of New Zealanders are going to grow up in unsuitable, unhealthy homes, getting respiratory diseases that we should only be getting in places that are cold and dry.
What's the green solution?
The green solution is to expand the eligibility of public housing, to build more state homes, and to ensure that, like many other countries in the world, we have a strong public housing program. Like you go to most developed countries, and council homes and state housing is a common thing. People have security of tenure.
How do you pay for it?
Yeah, by taxing property investors, by putting No, I didn't think about it. Sorry, man. Yes, our government debt may be low, but actually, household debt is at record levels high. And while government keeps talking about maintaining debt at record levels, we've got people queuing up at work and income because they're being burdened by credit card debt, they're burdened by their overdrafts, and this is poor and irresponsible fiscal management. I'm tired of hearing the banks as we go through the recession that we should put minimum wage down. Like, this is the economic system that we perpetuated, and so let's actually get policies that are in touch with the working class and stop pandering to property investors.
For everybody that a problem doesn't work, socialism doesn't work, it actually makes sense. Thomas Sowell said, and this is one big thing, because poverty, of course, affects Māori and Pacifica the most. And Thomas Sowell is a very good example of this. He was a black guy raised up in Georgia. He said that the black family has survived centuries of slavery, generations of Jim Crow, but has disintegrated in the wake of the Liberals' expansion of the welfare state. What we must do is stimulate, have an area of stimulation, which is why you Conservatives would make the first $20,000 that you earn tax-free. We'll also help on that. For most families, that means that the first $40,000 is tax-free, and then we would have the brackets of 60 and 100. We will also take GST off of household necessities, which includes meat and fruit and veggies and sanitary products, because that is really important, and we can see what works over in Australia. So we are very strong about the idea of making it stimulus rather than stealing from other people and giving it to other people. The idea is to make it that way. In terms of coronavirus stuff, I want to put the aim on you there, Jack. Not you, but your industry. Because what has happened is that there's a real strong area where New Zealanders, good New Zealanders, are being told, wash your hands and don't be racist. The majority of Kiwis are not racist, and you're going to get dickheads because racism is not racist. What you've got to think, what you want to talk about is that when you are marrying to the Chinese community, it is the Chinese community who are the most cautious group, and where you look at the business going down 30%, that is where your issue is, so that's where you need to encourage that aspect.
Is it working out? Kia ora, I just want to...
Housing.
Let's stick to housing, yeah. I just want to thank David for invoking the example of Switzerland, which is one of 6 countries in the world that has tops tax policy. And that is a major reason why Switzerland does not have a housing crisis. We do also have to deal with the supply side. I 100% agree with David here. We have to give local councils the incentives to stand up to NIMBYs and actually intensify development in cities so that people can walk, cycle and take public transport to all the things they want to do in their lives. And you know what? Let's start experimenting with that in Epsom.
Let's move on to climate. Michael, I'll come back to you on this. Delaying bringing agriculture under the years. You can't get a feedback through for electric vehicles. Like I say, Greenpeace gave you 0 out of 10 for the. Okay, Tracy, you get it goes on. Okay, 0 out of 10 for the zero carbon act. It's mainly focused on new roads. Your leader, of course, famously called climate change the nuclear-free moment of this generation. Do you think you've lived up to a nuclear-free response?
Without any doubt. This government has been a piece of legislation in the Zero Carbon Act that puts us on track for net zero carbon by 2050. And we actually legislate that into our system so that we have an independent climate change commission that's not run by the politicians. This is the problem that you get. We actually have the experts and scientists who are going to tell us on a 5-yearly cycle what we need to do to get our emissions down sector by sector so that we can actually have a sustainable track to net zero. That's actually world leading.
So what happens? My question is...
The example is the UK who brought in this framework and they've actually been very successful at bringing down their carbon emissions. So it's not the system that makes a difference. I need to take it up on the public transport tracks. Because this is the government which has made a bigger investment in public transport in Auckland and across this country than any for about 50 years. So massive investments in rail in this package, massive investments in Auckland, in Wellington. In June of this year, for the first time you'll be able to catch commuter rail to Hamilton. Now don't ask me why you want to go to Hamilton. If you do,
Okay, Tracy, you want to say something?
The Kiwi rail that we inherited from the previous government was on the bones of its arse. They had bridges they could hardly go over anywhere. Regional rail tracks closed down for lack of maintenance. We've invested over $1 billion this year, and we're actually starting to open up new routes so that we get our freight off the roads and onto rail where the carbon emissions are lower. And that's happening right now.
Okay, let me ask this though, very quickly, and then Tracy, you can go, I promise. If we're not hitting those targets, and they're all laid out, and I get that, and the experts are going to be keeping up, if we're not hitting those targets, who enforces the government? What do we do? How do you enforce that?
Well, that comes back to the government. We've got to take responsibility for this. For the first time, we have actually started to bring agriculture into what we're doing in this space. They've sat completely outside it under national. The original ETS that was put in place by David Parker under the last government had agriculture in, was taken out by the last national government. We've brought them back in. That's baby steps, because we don't want to bust the whole industry overnight, but we need to start the just transition from actually happening. Same with energy, same with oil and gas. We've got to actually transition away from this stuff. It's not going to happen overnight. We've actually put the steps in place that will make it happen and will make it real.
I know that Taranaki has the highest unemployment in the country. Tracy, I'll give you this mic. It's better.
That's just transition. That's about actually getting the
So there's a couple of things I want to pick up on. First of all, under the coalition agreement, there was a requirement for a climate change act. I just want to address the shouting out from the Green supporters over there with regard to it being toothless. Shane Shaw wanted to ensure that there would be no turning back of anything that he did. So he spent weeks and weeks and months talking to the opposition. So please listen and decide to put your bias away when you want to talk about this issue. Rather than deciding that you know which political party is blocking what, talk to the leader of your own party and acknowledge the efforts that he has made to try and make sure that the steps forward that we have taken as a parliament, because only this young man here didn't support that piece of legislation. I want to make sure that we acknowledge is that if you go and have a look at the coalition agreement, the supporting of rail was required. The supporting of rail was negotiated and required of this coalition government. And that was to do exactly what Michael said, start to shift our trucks off the road. With regard to feedback, the conversation is not over. James knows that. I have dinner with James every sitting block to make sure that the relationship between our parties stays fresh and we keep talking. If you have to get your head around MMP, how can you say that Labour doesn't deliver this or National doesn't deliver that in an MMP environment? And until the voting public figures out how MMP works and we have grown-up conversations about issues, then we won't move on from this sort of partisan type of politics.
Where do you go for dinner with James?
Well, usually Bellamy's because we're not allowed to leave the and we pay for ourselves.
And of course you pay for yourself. It wasn't going to be anything. Yeah, we'll give you another something back here. Use this one, Spark.
This is a problem when we've got national being climate deniers and then Michael will be taking baby steps on the climate crisis. Like, we cannot afford to be taking baby steps in the climate crisis, and we cannot bank on the Zero Carbon Act to take us there. The reality is we don't have an actual just transition plan to help our farmers move away from polluting companies. They're held hostage by the banks, burdened by massive debts, and this is driving a lot of the farmers actually into ill mental health. We've got to have a proper package that reskills, redeploys, and retrains our community so that they can move away from polluting industries. That is what a just transition plan actually looks like. It's what and the thing is, there's a lot of talk about MMP as a system and how we need to compromise, but there is no compromising with a climate crisis. If we don't take the bold steps that are required right now, there will be no future for our generations. And the infrastructure project is a great sign of how wrong we've got it in this term of government. And Julianne Jenkins has been very vocal on the fact that we need an electrified transport system, not more roads that will increase emissions. This is the thing, this election we've got a choice between delaying climate action, denying the receiving a climate crisis, or voting for a party that takes climate crisis seriously.
a climate crisis in the room? Most people? Okay, so I didn't ask who didn't. I really didn't ask. Folks, Uncle Winston, bless his cotton socks, has taught us about how to solve our climate crisis. Fuck it all, mate. Uncle Winston has shown us the way forward, because if you look around this room right now, if all of the seats in this room were the Provincial Growth Fund, then the front row would be the Green Investment Fund that the Greens won in the coalition agreement. That, folks, is bargaining power, which Winston has and the Greens do not. If you care about the environment, then you need it at the table all of the time in all governments, and you need to be prepared to work with National and Labour to drive the hardest bargain for the environment. That's what we need in a climate crisis.
Hang on. The climate is always changing, and there's a lot of skepticism.
Don't worry, I'll bring Elliot into another subject we have in there. My question to you is, what was the question? No, that's what I was going to.
Well, what we don't want is a just transition from bricks to forward, so we've got to be careful that we organise that carefully. But the thing about the Greens is that we've got to don't forget that they had the balance of power at the last election, just like New Zealand First. They could have decided who was in the government, and so with the great balance of power, they went to the government, to Labour and New Zealand First and said, yeah, we'll back you, this is what we want. Well, was there a great focus on climate change policy? Was there a great focus on water? Was there a great focus on electric vehicles? No. What they wanted was a referendum on recreational marijuana. That's their problem. That's been the frustration of many New Zealanders, is that this government has been one of just horse training. One week, New Zealand First gets what they want.
So what would you guys do? Because you didn't put agriculture on the EQs, you didn't pass a zero carbon bill, you love roads. What would you do?
We are where we expect the National Party to be, which is one that has supported the zero carbon bill. We want to take decisions seriously, and we're more pragmatic about how we go about getting to where we have to go over the decades, and that's about investing in the science that we need, actually enabling us to do the biotechnology, to grow the grasses that will make the difference in terms of our methane emissions and things like that. But the Greens want, they want us to solve the problem, but they want us to tie our hands behind our back in terms of the technology that we need to use to fix it. So we'll actually get on to make a difference.
I'm sure we'll get the technology just yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. I'm aware of the time, so I want to move on to a couple of other issues. Let's do some social issues here. And David, will you have a 1 minute ban why we should all vote for euthanasia?
Oh, I thought it was terrible. I thought you were talking about the one I had before. Look, I put the end of life choice bill in the private members ballot, and it ended up being a 4-year campaign that is still going on. So we passed it through Parliament. It was the longest and most intense parliamentary scrutiny of any bill that I know of in the history of our Parliament. We had 16 months in Select Committee, 4 months in Committee of the Whole House days every Wednesday, and on and on. Now it's passed and it is a law, but it will only become a law that judges enforce if it gets a majority at referendum. So you're actually going to have some extra votes, not just your, party vote, ACT and candidate vote, David Seymour if you're an Epsom. So, best time to campaign is always right now, by the way. You're also going to have the vote should the End of Life Choice Act 2019 come into force. Here's why I hope you'll vote yes. They say that a society should be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable member. Well, one of those groups of people that's extremely vulnerable in our society is 1 or 2% of us will get to the end of our life and be suffering. Not through anything we chose, just circumstance. We may have cancer or some sort of illness. And people will say, why don't you get palliative care? Well, palliative care is great, I'm a big supporter, but it doesn't work for everyone. So you're then lying there, potentially writhing around, pissing and crapping yourself on plastic sheets. And the moral police come along and say, no, my child, you must keep suffering to fit my morality. That is wrong. That is inhumane. And what is right and what is humane is to say it's my life, it's my choice, and under the freedom of the rule of law, I can make my choice. Now here's the next thing. This debate towards the referendum is going to generate more bullshit than the Murray sewage plant. You are going to hear all sorts of terrible things. In the Netherlands, there are trucks that drive around and pick up Granny and take her away to the euthanasia station. You're going to hear that in the Netherlands, people do not euthanize the armbands because they're so scared they're going to get taken away by the euthanasia police. And I don't have time to rebut all those arguments, but I will just leave you with this thought. 15 years after they legalised in the Netherlands, they did a poll. This was provided to me by the Dutch Embassy. And they asked, do you support the law? 88% of Dutch people support the law. 75% say yes, and I actually might like to use it myself. Another 13% who I really admire, magnanimous, compassionate people, say it's not for me, but I think other people should have the choice. 6% aren't sure, and 6% are opposed. Now, either the Dutch people, an industrialised democratic country that were the first Europeans to make it to New Zealand, have completely lost the plot, or all the stuff that you hear about how bad these laws are is bullshit. And I think you guys are smart enough to figure out which one is the case. So I hope you will vote yes for compassion and choice.
Do we all know which way we're going to be voting for David's referendum? Can I get a show of hands? Who will be supporting David's bill when they vote?
Actually, sorry, I'm just going to let you know. This is David's bill, and I'm really pleased that we were able to. This is David's bill, and I'm really pleased we were able to work with him to get it to this place. But I'm going to say this: I'm not going to put up my hand for either of those things because this is your vote. All right? I ask you to read this legislation, read the bill, and inform yourselves because now the power's in your hand.
Way to kill my game. The rest of you, who's going to support it?
Well, I'm voting for it.
Who's not going to be supporting it? I'm going to go to Elliot because Elliot, we know that a big part of you, I'll come to you on candidates for the moment. Okay? Get the talk.
Alright, I'll keep it short. Effectively, when you've got the vast majority of public submissions stating that this euthanasia, the idea of killing yourself by way of doctor or whatever, is actually really bad. We should be listening to those who have actually cared for us for so long. When you look at overseas, and besides, and Mr. Seymour's absolutely doing his best for that, and I admire him because he is having integrity for it. That's absolutely fine. But we are supposed to be a culture which upholds life and life for adversity and easy times and bad times and good times. And when you are pushing the idea of dying by doctor, you pervert healthcare. And what we see as well is that so many of our people do uphold life. So what may look like an option for some becomes an expectation for the vulnerable. And the Conservative has always been stepping up for those who are vulnerable and the weaker members of society. And they will be affected with great lethal effect from this bill. That's all.
Of course, we will have a referendum on the recreational sale and use of cannabis. I'll go to Ricardo from the Greens.
Of course I do. But I think actually I just want to backtrack very briefly on euthanasia and acknowledge that there is a lot of hurt from people living with disabilities around the debate. And while I will be voting for yes, I think it's really important that we don't only talk about dying with dignity, but actually enabling everybody to live with dignity. And when we've got people living with disabilities that don't have access to accessible homes, adequate care, I see the hurt of those communities when the political priorities has been about dying with dignity. So I want to take that hurt in the Greens. That is a conversation we've been having, and that it is a painful conversation. And I do think we need to make disabled people's rights a priority in the next term. As for drug reform, of course the answer is yes. And more than whether we decriminalize cannabis and legalize it is out of the question. Now we've got to talk about the model. And I'm really concerned that we are letting market forces drive the legislation, and what we need to be focusing on is reducing harm, and we need to not have what we've got in California, which is that companies are making huge profits, lobbying legislators so that they can sell quite damaging products. And I think cannabis should be accessed in a way that it is absolutely safe. I come from Mexico. I've seen the worst of the war on drugs. I've seen what that does to our communities. And my hometown of Tijuana has been absolutely ravaged by the policies of the US and Mexico. And it's resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of people. We've got a chance to be world leaders in the provision of public health and reducing harm. And I'm really excited for the Greens to be leading that debate next term.
So this is not a referendum about whether or not people should or will smoke cannabis, because 80% of us do. Get real. Let's get real. This referendum is about whether you want, who do you want to supply this cannabis? Do you want it to be gangs and criminals? Or do you want it to be businesses paying people good, honest jobs? And yes, a lot of those, and it will provide jobs for a lot of the people who used to be criminals. And that some of that money will go through tax to be able to deal with the harm and educate people about the harm that cannabis brings. That is the real question that's in front of us. And when you look at it from that perspective, legalise it, regulate it, tax it.
New Zealand First, who works with James Shaw and Andrew Little to create a draft piece of legislation. That's my major role inside this coalition on behalf of New Zealand First. So I take exception to Ricardo saying that it was market forces that are driving this. This was negotiated and created with the Green Party, with New Zealand First and with Labour. And the way that James and I particularly started it was, we took Andrew Little out of it because I wanted to understand what was the purpose, what was driving the Green Party. And so we whiteboarded it out. What was it that they wanted to achieve from this? And New Zealand First agreed with every single one of those points, right? And we had promised that we would give you, the public, the right to decide on this issue. Again, I ask you to read the legislation before you go to the poll, but also take note of some interesting bits and pieces going on. Like we've been to Canada, we've been to America, we've had a look at what has gone wrong there. But please, please, please inform yourselves and don't just accept what somebody tells you because it fits with their bias.
Three quick points on the one. First is the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is happy to tell us what her view is on the euthanasia, but for some reason won't tell us what her view is on this one, which is interesting. I think she realises the mood of the nation is not with it. Secondly, when it comes to the marijuana debate, what you want if you're having a referendum is a law, like we have with euthanasia, and David's done the right job on that. You've got a law, you know exactly what it is, and people vote yes or no. What we've got here is a vague proposal, possibly a draft bill, and we don't know all the detail, and so you're not actually having to end up with a Brexit like. It's true. legalise marijuana, look at what's happening in Canada and say, well, okay, well, this is the obvious thing to say, yep, they're doing a big experiment, we're going to see. There's 40 million people, let's just give it 5 years and see if it works out. That's the rational thing. Let's see how it works out, and then we can make a vote. Why do we need to rush out the first year, just after they've done it, and take what is ultimately a pretty big chance about the impact that will have on communities? It certainly won't help get the nets off the couch in Northland more quickly by legalising marijuana.
Okay, Michael, you just want to say
I'd say a word on end of life first. In these conscience votes, when you're in Parliament, we don't just do a vote kind of by calling out the numbers. You have to walk through the eyes or the nose lobbies. It's different to most of the other votes. And it kind of, for me anyway, I don't know about others, you really think about it before you go either way. And I had this moment before the vote on this one where it became clear to me that, for me, there was an uncomfortable truth whether I walked into the eyes lobby or into the nose lobby. The uncomfortable truth for me as I walked into the nose lobby, because I will vote against it, is that it is true, David is correct when he says this, that there are people who towards the end of their life through terminal illnesses will suffer extreme pain and have bad ends to their lives. This law is not passed, that is true. Palliative care does a lot and it can do a lot more, but there will be some cases, some people it doesn't help. The uncomfortable truth on the other side, and I say this with absolute surety, is that if the bill does proceed, if it is voted on, there will be people who access end-of-life choice who don't really, in their heart of hearts, want to. And the evidence is very clear internationally. And I've had the people from the disabled community in front of me who said that at points in my life, with the explicit and implicit pressure that was on me, I would have accessed this. And I wouldn't have wanted to have had that choice in front of me. The evidence is very clear internationally that there are good people who feel like a burden on those around them, who will access this, who don't really want to. And so for me, there's not a clear doctrinaire choice on this, it's a weighing up of those things. And for me, I come down on the side that if as lawmakers and decision makers, we have to make decisions that as much as possible guard against that. Okay. On cannabis, I think you'd actually have to be stoned yourself to not understand that current system does not work. And Jeff is right, that we actually need to treat this as a health issue where people aren't dealing with cannabis or other drugs well. We need to get them the health and the addiction support that will make a difference in their lives. Criminalising them does not help. The evidence is abundantly clear on this, and I'll be voting yes.
Very clearly stipulates the end-of-life choice bill does clearly stipulate though that you have to have a terminal illness and be very close to the end of your life. I think it's just important to point that out. And I know that there's clearly a subject that is going to be debated at some length this year. Now we're getting near to the end of things. Elliot, I'm going to give you 30 seconds on this. You've got to, 30 seconds on cannabis, okay?
All right, as a guy who's actually spent 20 years working with our at-risk youth directly and high-risk youth, basically if you legalise, and it's not cannabis that we're talking about, it's THC that is actually being voted for. And what we've seen overseas is that the THC potency goes up and the deaths go up. The black and Hispanic arrest rate goes up. When they said that it would go down, it's gone the opposite. So what we'll see here is that we'll see further at-risk populations growing bigger, the problems are going to go bigger, and everything's going to go stuffed, and you're going to get a few dollars into the coffers. But on the silver lining, social services and my youth work will be funded for 50 years.
I've got one thing I want to bring up is, let's just get a quick show of hands from everyone in here. Who here is middle class? Right. Who here is middle class? So Michael, why should our tax dollars subsidise them at university?
Because there is no society in the history of the world that has not done well out of investing in the education of its citizens. Can be solved by smart, well-educated people. And if we're talking about investing in education, it's actually the poorest people in our community who benefit the most from access to free education. Otherwise they're locked out. And then we're going to, I think you speak specifically about fees free, so I think you might be going in that direction. Fees free, for example, gives a huge benefit to people getting into the trades. It actually gives 2 years free for people getting into apprenticeships. I can't think of a better thing to invest in.
So should we, I know your budget is sort of up in the air at the moment, but should we continue to offer fees-free education for second and third years at university institutions?
Before the election. Listen, they've made huge strides. When I was going to university in the late 90s, every year there were massive hikes to our fees. It's late also working with New Zealand First and Degrees that brought in interest free, that brought in first year free, that have stopped the massive hikes every single year. That's all at risk if the government changes this year. These guys have said that they'll do away with a whole lot of that, so think very carefully about those issues.
I'd lay out, feel free to grab what is called the upfront investment tertiary policy of New Zealand First. We would go further. So and we launched it back in 2017, I couldn't negotiate it through, either with the National Party or with the Labour Party. As close as we got was the first year free. But there is a way to actually, why should you actually talk about the baby boomers and so on and so forth, the number of people that decided to take away free tertiary education in this country had free tertiary education. There is still a way to bring us back at about under 2% of GDP, we could support you and have you here without debt. Because we talk about how do you get into housing when you've already got this debt. How do you go forward in your life? I'm an ex-debt collector, I know what it takes and what it does to you, and that's here. But you will own your country, your skills. What we've got a shortage of is skills. So I ask you to take this. If you want to ask further questions, then this will tell you what the policy is, and I'm open to answer further questions. But we can do this.
Okay.
If she came round to my house, I'd fucking pay up, hey?
Hey, what we'll do is if we're getting to the end of things, just think of 20 seconds like a last hurrah kind of thing. You can take something to say and then we'll wrap up. Feel free to.
Well, just last hurrah is just simply to say that freeze is a classic example of this government. It's a policy that is not achieved what it set out to achieve. They said they were going to increase the access to education, or tertiary education. They spent a huge amount of money, and fewer students have turned up to tertiary education. So, a great talk, great conversations and results. And that's what we're seeing time and time again from this government. Lots of good intentions, very poor delivery. And we can do better. And a national government will restore the momentum that we have as a country and lift our aspirations to the world. So,
Yeah. 30 seconds, like, vote for me, that sort of stuff.
So, yep. Basically, we were and are the protectors of our culture, of our values. We are the ones who will make things easier. We will protect your freedoms, and we will protect every element of your living growth that we have here. We will also protect you if you want to have a firearms license, because such a ripping and destroying of the very culture, the fabric of culture that we see in this nation, we are going to stop it. We are going to bring value back and get rid of the ideology that is sneaking in, the most murderous ideology in the history of mankind.
Elliot England!
So it's the last, to close off, I think fees free education is a great start. But if we want to close the gap between low income people
Last year, not first year.
and high income areas we go with education, what we've got to do is bring back postgraduate student allowances, make it universal, and increase the cost of living. And we've got students that are having to work multiple jobs in order to continue studying. Things are not working. The Greens have been staunch on putting back postgraduate student allowances. We are the only party that is committed to welfare reform, and we cannot risk having another government that talks about baby steps and it's not going to be bold about his election.
And give us a 30 seconds.
The other parties won't deliver on that. Only the Green Party will lift benefits, give state housing for all, and tax the local users so they can follow all services.
Half of all jobs
2025. By 2025. Seriously, I gotta say, young acts are very vocal considering your leader disowned your policy earlier this week. But I like you guys. I think it was a very sensible policy, evidence-based. Well done. Thank you. Don't shit on me. Okay. Half school jobs are going to be automated by 2025. Artificial intelligence, automation. None of the other parties are looking ahead at what's coming down the pipeline. We don't know what courses you should be taking at universities. Even the professors of this university don't know what jobs are going to be disappearing in the next 5 years. The fact is that fees free has disproportionately helped rich people. So, if you want to give everyone a fair chance in life, you invest in early childhood education, and we should be investing in an unconditional basic income so that everyone gets $1,000 a month, no questions asked, you choose what to do with your life. Our priorities for this election will be housing, environment, unconditional basic income. Kia ora.
Well, now's the opportunity in 2020. We've got 6 months to go. We've got a chance to make history, to throw our first term government out after one term. It hasn't happened since 1975, and that would make a real difference because I think when you look back at it with a reasonable review of the 9 years of the national government, we made great progress. We restored our confidence and reversed the flow. Remember when John Keane stood up in front of the Westpac Stadium and said, there was about 30,000 people leaving net to Australia every year. We managed to reverse that flow over 9 years so that they were coming back to New Zealand because New Zealanders felt that they had an opportunity to get ahead and do well in their country. And we've got a chance to restore that momentum very quickly in September if we get back. Thanks very much.
Thank UOA and GETSOC for organising this. I forgot to say that at the beginning. I think you guys have done an awesome event. Thank you, Jack. Obviously, we would have rather have had Patty or you've done all right. You've been pretty good. And my fellow candidates, thank you very much as well. Especially all the great crowd coming out. It gives me hope that actually we have these debates and are well attended at the University of Auckland. I think I've said my piece. The ACT Party stands for freedom. It is the only party that consistently does so, and it's the only cause that can truly make the world better over time rather than giving with one hand and taking with the other, which there's far too much of, in my view. And we've got out and done the business. One MP made the End of Life Choice Act a reality, but there's bigger issues that I believe we could take on given the mandate. Housing affordability and the cost of living for young people being perhaps one of the most obvious ones and the one I'm glad we got an opportunity to talk about tonight. So thank you everybody. Thank you Jack. I hope you have a great night. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. It's been interesting. What I hope you're going to do this year is go and look at policy. I really, really, really do. We took 300 pages of policy into the negotiations, both with the National Party and with the Labour Party. I beg your pardon?
You didn't implement anything in your manifesto. The PDF was not in your manifesto.
Oh, shut up.
So there were 54 points of commonality with Labour on educational policy. So I think you'll find that the work I've been doing has actually been delivering. If you want to go and have a look at our education policy, Jeff, at some time, you'll find that that's been delivered. But why I'm asking you to do that is you are going to cast your vote and you need to decide what you believe in before you go into those polls. Once you decide what you believe in, go and have a look at the policies of the political parties around you. One of the policies I want you to make sure you go and have a look at is how we're going to support you to get into your own house.
we believe that New Zealanders should be a home-owning population. And I'm working on policy around a universal family benefit. That is how the boomers got their houses. That is how they were supported to have their families. That is how they actually were able to capitalise on it to get their deposit. You are paying more in rent than you would if you had a mortgage, but you cannot save the deposit because you're paying so much in rent. Where the government needs to go is not to continue to lift the accommodation supplement, although we know that there is a struggle and we will do something there. But where New Zealand First believes we need to go is we need to support you to gain the deposit you can, so that you can buy your own home, and then you have a place that you can put down roots and grow the family that we need.
Thank you, Martin. Your vote for Jacinda Ardern as Prime Minister and Labour in government this year is about building more state houses for the families that need them. It's about a families package that's going to lift 50,000 to 60,000 of our kids out of poverty over the next 10 years. It's about teaching New Zealand history in schools. It's about lifting parental leave to 26 weeks. It's about making sure that we've got decent standards for people who are renting, so that your houses aren't cold and leaky and damp and don't send 50,000 kids a year to hospital every year, which is what's been happening in this country. It's a vote for a leader like Jacinda Ardern, who can actually bring this country together when we go through terrible and tough times as she has this year. Someone who is proud on the world stage. Those are the things that Labour has been doing. It's the progress that we have made in the government, and if your vote is even more that we can do. Thank you.
I'm hoping guys you might have a couple of minutes to stay around and talk to anyone who has some specific questions for you. But thank you so much for coming out and supporting this event this evening. Thank you so much to Debate on for organising this. I think we